We're playing 1-3 at TCH Houston.
TCH Houston. Now, that is a place that you don't hear that much about. My friend, Alan, I don't know if you know the management over there, but I think the GM, his name is Alan. He's an Asian guy. He's an old buddy of mine from LA. I actually helped him get that job at TCH. His name is Alan Lee. I don't know if
Yeah,
you know.
I've
You,
heard of them.
you've heard of him? Yeah.
I know them.
So 1-3 TCH Houston. Okay.
So we're 2.35K effective.
2.35K. So this is a match the stack?
It's match, yes.
All right.
So 1-3 is the only game that ever runs at
Right.
TCH.
The biggest game. Right. Right.
So not much background on the villain, but a little bit. He's probably the only other competent player at the
Okay.
table.
Okay.
He's probably a 21, 22-year-old Indian kid.
Okay. Young guy.
And yeah, bought into cover.
Okay.
So let's get started. So we have a button straddle, which I'm not a fan of, but that's for another day.
By the way, do you mind if not necessarily your name, but
Yeah, go ahead.
do you mind if I mention why you couldn't come on the call-in show? For anybody that thinks this guy might sound a little bit nerdy, are you on the Texas A&M football team?
I am. I'm a long snapper and a fullback.
You are a long snap. How much do you weigh? And a fullback?
Yeah, it's weird. I weigh 230 pounds.
Oh, okay.
So
I
a
guess
little light, but
I guess long snappers don't they have to have mobility. Right? I mean, I remember Steve Diossi. I don't know if that's one of the
yeah.
first long snappers. He actually invented the position. If you do a YouTube search on Bill Belichick long snapper,
Oh
there,
yeah, that's a cool video.
yeah, that is a really
Yeah.
really cool video. Um, so, anyways, you had spring practice the last couple weeks. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so button straddle, okay,
So button straddle, we have a limp under the gun,
okay.
and then I open the low jack to 35 with ace jack of clubs.
So you raise over the top of a limp to 35 with ace of clubs, jack of clubs, okay.
Yep. And then the cutoff goes 3x to 105. And then the limper folds and I call.
And he's got you covered, so you're 2.35 effective. So obviously this is a defending hand here, right? Ace jack suited. So the pot's going to be like 220, something like that, right to the flop.
220, exactly.
Okay.
So we go to the flop, and the flop's going to be the 10 of clubs, 9 of hearts, 7 of diamonds.
10 of clubs, 9 of hearts, 7 of diamonds. So you've got a backdoor flush draw, and you've obviously got a gutter here, 2 and 8, right? Okay. Uh huh.
So I check him flow.
Mm-hmm.
He goes third pot to 75.
So he bets 75. Is that right? So check 75. Okay.
And so this is the first inflection point in the hand. So I've been watching a lot of Squish's streams and stuff. Been
Squish My
working.
Tomato, Mark Goon, who of course streams on, I think 500 NL and 1K NL nightly on Twitch. I hadn't looked at Twitch in years, but I'm disappointed because apparently Twitch doesn't have an app for the Roku. I never even knew that. So I can't watch him on the TV, but he streams like 3 days a week. He might be the highest like cash game regular streamer now, at least for American. Mark Goon, you should definitely check it out. I think he starts at like 8 or 9 Eastern or Pacific. But I mean, you can just go search for Mark Goon on Twitch, and so you've been watching a lot of his stream. Okay.
Watching, working with him a lot. And so when he takes that third pot sizing, as a guy who knows what he's doing, if it's as a competent player, I'm interpreting that as a range bet type sizing, which he really shouldn't be doing on this board.
So you think he's trying to simplify here and bet like 1/3 with his entire range. Now I will fully admit that I haven't run this or looked at the outputs. Oh, by the way, also to Squish My Tomato, Crush Side Poker, subscribe content creator coach. He was a subscriber and now has graduated. But I actually ran this hand by him too. Actually, I texted him about this hand because I knew that he would know the output. So you think that he should go large or mostly check? I'm assuming.
Yeah, so I ran this hand both node locked and at equilibrium,
Uh huh.
and it kind of gave a 50% or check at about a 50-50 frequency at equilibrium.
And then in the sizing that's used when he bets?
Uh, 50 to 66%,
50,
something like that.
50 to 60%?
Yep.
So you thought this was a little bit small.
I thought it was a little bit small, and I thought there's a good chance he's doing it with his entire range, which if he is doing that with his entire range, what I've seen on a lot of Dune streams
Hmm.
is we can raise at like a 35-40% frequency.
Now, what I will say here, this was my initial reaction, and it was actually confirmed in terms from Mark's point of view too, that I think I would rather have some worse showdown value type hands to make this play. And possibly hands that might have that might be a little bit better of a draw, like a queen jack, maybe some. I mean, if you have ace eight suited here, I'm not sure if you're defending here with ace eight suited, or if you were to have like a 9-8 or a 7-8, it's sort of like a protection type of raise, right? Because you can't just like allow somebody to 1/3 you right in position all the time. I mean, you've got the backdoor club draw here, so I don't know if I would take this specific hand and do it. I mean, I know what you're thinking, but I might want to have a little bit better of a draw and a little bit less showdown. It's always interesting to have two overcards to top pair here, even though it's a 3-bet pot too. Because sometimes these cards, obviously not a jack's going to bring a one liner to an 8, but having ace high is one of those ones that can sometimes sort of get to a certain spot where your opponent's just going to barrel away because they don't think that you have, they think it's better for them than it is for you, and you actually win a little bit more value in that way.
That makes a lot of sense.
So it
I
sounds
agree.
sounds to me like you check raised here though.
I check raised to 230, so right at 3x.
So hero goes 230. Some people also saying king jack. Obviously king jack, king jack is double gutted, right? Some people might miss that a little bit. Now you could maybe throw in some king queen, but I mean you'd like a king jack type of hand with a backdoor, something with an 8 in it. It's like a lot of like these hands that have like a lot of outs that also have sort of less showdown value. So okay, so you go 230.
I go 230, and he calls.
So you can't love life right now, right?
No, I'm not loving it, and I'm starting to really weight him towards lots of overpairs.
Right.
So,
Right. So the pot's just a hair under 700 now, right?
yep,
680? Okay.
680.
Yep. Okay.
And so the turn is the deuce of hearts bringing in the backdoor heart draw.
Interesting. So just a pure brick, just a
Here.
pure brick.
And so I decide to continue here, telling my story,
Mm-hmm.
and I go 400 into 680.
So hero bets 400 into 680. Now, let me just ask you this question though. So you're taking about a 2/3, sort of pot size bet. From your opponent's perspective, is there any portion of his range on this card that he will start to fold out that calls your check raise on the flop?
So I'm actually glad you mentioned that because I was thinking about that. And so this is one of the things I've talked a lot with Swish about.
Mm-hmm.
Is so I'm not expecting very many folds on this turn. Matter of fact, I think he's going to be calling pretty much everything he gets here to the turn with that's strong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm really trying to do with this turn sizing here is to set up a little bit of an overbet shove on the river and just get him to fold out aces, kings, queens, jacks
So let
on
me
rivers.
so let me ask you this question though, because obviously you're deep into the theory, and you're probably, especially if you think that this you're trying to structure correctly and probably trying to play balanced. You have to admit though that there are scenarios where you are supposed to have some check fold give ups, right? After
No,
this action on the turn.
for sure.
So what cards are you check fold giving up on? Just the board pairs?
Board, yeah, that's where I think I'm getting into trouble here. I'm over bluffing this line for
I just
sure.
think that you should there has to be some check give ups here on the turn that aren't just board pairs.
And
So
so for sure, and that's what when I ran it node locked, what I found. So I node locked it to force a bet range bet in position and for him to not find any three bets.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't mind the check raise flop. It did that at like an 80%, 88% frequency, but it pretty much always check folded this turn.
So you're saying that your combo was check raised, but what or when it was, it's mostly check folded on turn. I mean, that's what I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think I gotta either choose one or the other here. I gotta either
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
check raise it and then, or just, I have to check fold turn here probably.
So he makes the call, right? And it's
So
about
he makes the call.
1480 to the river. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. And then so the river bricks out completely, and it's the five of diamonds.
Five of diamonds. All right. So now, again, that just changes absolutely nothing here. I mean, at some point, you got to give up, though, right? I mean, unless you think the guy just overfolds to just aggression, where he's just playing like he's going to play a little CLP like Fifth Street Chicken, and Fifth Street Chicken is sort of a term that I came up with. It doesn't necessarily apply to this spot, but I think that the whole adage in No Limit of, well, if he called the turn and nothing happened at the river and the river's a brick, he has to call the river. And I think that that's total bullshit, because my contention is that, and I'm not saying that you should do this in this case, but if you bet again, that is change. And I always tell people, like, go watch some single draw No Limit Deuce. It's played at the World Series. It's like the Cadillac of No Limit, beyond Hold'em. The game has so little information except for betting patterns, where you'll see somebody open with a pat hand, somebody call in position, the guy checks, he pats from up front, the guy in position draws one, and then the guy from up front checks and just check folds because the guy bet. Now, obviously, it's way more nuanced than that, but there are certainly times when you can plan to fold even when a brick comes. Now, like I said, I'm not saying that this is necessarily the time. So you've got about 1,700 left in your stack now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my question here is, do I go for it and continue telling the story? And
I think I'm
do
gonna.
I get the folds out of overpairs here?
Here's the thing: like, you're trying to pick the hands that have the most amount of equity, so that you can continue on, Jacob, when you do pick up equity. But there are going to be times when you don't pick up equity, right? So to stay inevitably balanced, you have to have sometimes when you give up. And we already know that the turn probably shouldn't be bet like this. I think that this would just sort of be compounding here. I also kind of wonder too, if you do think that the guy is good, could he possibly even have something a little bit stronger here than you think? Now, with that being said, if he is three betting somewhat of a I would say, like, kind of a wider type of range here, is there ever any merit here, chat, you can get on board with, just maybe something that somebody doesn't consider? Is there any merit to under bluffing here at the end? Meaning, like, you want to try to get him off of some hand that has like an 8 in it. But I don't know. I mean, it's low jack versus cutoff, so it's probably not going to be comprised that much. I'm just thinking it would suck, like, if he wins with like a hand like 9-8 or 7-8 or jack 10 or something, one of these things that might fold. But that this might not be the situation to do it in, but sometimes people miss that. So there are times when you don't have to polarize all in. You can sometimes actually give yourself a cheap price by going like 1/3. Obviously, you're gonna get snapped off here by overpairs, but I think, like, at this point, I'm gonna give up here for sure.
Yeah, you're giving up here. Well,
Yeah.
I don't do that, and I shove
Well.
all in.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I get snapped off by 10-10.
So, wow, top set. Huh.
Yep.
Well, so yeah, I mean, and again, I do wonder, like, how this guy is structuring, in the sense that how many overpairs does he get here with, and is he ever? I mean, does he get here? Does he play kings and aces this way? I mean, I suppose it's possible.
Interestingly enough, I actually talked to him last night, randomly ran into him.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he told me is he was calling with aces and kings, which really surprised me here.
But would he take? Would he play this line with aces and kings? Would he? Would he? I mean, I suppose.
So he said, but I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously never getting tens to fold, but
Mm-hmm. I mean, another hand too that like you block jacks and you block aces, right? He would
Right.
rather have jacks here probably than queens with what you're
Yeah.
representing, I would assume, with the gut shot. But it's definitely an interesting one. I think what, like I said, Jacob, it's sort of the right idea. I think your hand's probably played better as a pure call on the flop. You probably want to have hands that have a little bit better sort of equity to pick up the draw. But even if you were to do this with like the best hand, like the most hidden like types of holding, like a king jack with a backdoor or something like that, there's going to be times where you don't pick up the equity. Now you're going to pick up the equity way more with king jack with a backdoor than say like, ace jack or somewhat more. But even then, there's going to be times when you don't pick up the equity and then you're going to have to just give up. So you can have some give ups when you start a bluff.
So do you really so on the turns you continue to barrel club turns and then just tend to check, give up
I mean,
most
obviously, you're supposed to continue to barrel club turns. I mean, for the
right,
opposite
obviously.
for the opposite reason of what we just said, right? I mean, it's
Right.
just proper structuring, right? I mean, it's continuing with equity that you've picked up as a semi bluff. At the end, when I would surmise, I don't know the answer theoretically. That is one where you might go, if you're asking for a theoretical answer, it is interesting. That might be one where it goes to paper, where you go to
Right.
paper, where maybe because you're only supposed to, if you're structuring properly, because you're supposed to be continuing with the cards that give you equity, not this one, that you might run across triples if you miss. But in this situation, we wouldn't have done it because we're way over bluffing if we're continuing when we don't pick up the equity, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, made sense.
all right, Jacob. Appreciate the
Well,
call.
yeah, these YouTube comments are gonna be great.